Dr. Ryan Baugus from HQPT. Love having you here. Thanks for making time to be on the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, in preparing for this conversation, I came across an awesome blurb about you, I believe from your alma mater, in which they described your philosophy as making every single one of your patients the star of the show. Tell me how you go about doing that.
That's a good question. I think it stems at least partly from approaching each individual without having an agenda. Truly, if you're looking at each person as an individual and you can take time to get to know them and you see the uniqueness that makes them who they are, and you genuinely start to appreciate, like, hey, this is a person that's got goals and aspirations, and whether they be athletic or something as simple as ADLs or whatever it might be, like I think it has to come from a genuine place of truly appreciating, valuing the person that's in front of you. And then practically doing that is really trying hard to avoid to take the locus of control from them, right? Like, you have to foster internal belief within them that they have everything they need, to get better, whether it be pain or performance or whatever it is. Because I think there's a lot of people out there that have this internal belief, and maybe I'm sure, the PTs that are listening have come across these people where their projection into the future is negative. Yep. Their crystal ball projection about their adaptability or their ability to improve, either has been noceboed out of them, or they through personal experience, the positive outlook on, hey, I'm adaptable. I'm able to adapt to stimulus and grow and change. So yeah, if you are, I kind of look at it as like Yoda and Luke Skywalker. Star Wars, it's like, I'm the little green guy, I'm Yoda, they're Luke Skywalker, and they have the Force inside of them. They are the star of the show. They are the hero in this story. I'm just there to kind of like teach them, help them grow, put them in positions to bring that out. So
where do you come where do you come up with that mindset?
That's a good question also. I think it's probably learned humility to a certain degree of just years of practicing, and learning to really trust people. And I think part of it, is my worldview to a certain degree of, I think that everybody's valuable, and their past experiences and their beliefs and expectations that shape who they are as an individual on the day that, the minute that they walk through your door, all that stuff is valuable. And so I think, I think all the PTs here at HQPT, and I try to embody this, is like really genuinely being impressed with the people that you work with, whether it's, a 70-year-old or a 90-year-old or a pro football player. It's like, it's all, everybody's a hero.
Yeah. It's really, it sounds like you embody the idea of service through selflessness, and I think that's one of my pet peeves of physical therapists, and especially in this like me first world that is so Instagram driven, where you'll see posts that are far more about the PT than they are about the athlete. And I think getting away from that is what sets you apart, or so it seems. I think that's an awesome lesson to PTs listening. Is don't forget why we went to school. We didn't go to school for ourselves. We went to school for our patients and for our athletes. And so that seriously resonates. I also noticed, looking through your website, you are conveniently listed dead last in the line of physical therapists. Was that by design?
It's funny you mentioned that. I didn't know if anybody would ever notice that, but yes, it is intentional.
Okay. And just, I think I know why, but tell me why.
I think that, it's funny. We have a thing here. So I'm sitting in my office. We're in Milwaukee, Oregon right now. and we're part of a big gym. It's like a 10,000 square foot facility out there, and it's an awesome gym. We love it. We're super blessed. And from day one, it's really interesting to see all of us park far away. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like you leave the front spots for the patients.
Yep.
And I don't know. I think it probably has something to do with that idea of just, yeah, like being humble and putting other people first. And I think on the website, it's actually cracking me up that you noticed that, because I honestly, I didn't think anybody would ever notice that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it probably has something to do with just wanting to shine the spotlight on. It's kind of like the mirror, you just want to reflect the spotlight back on others. I don't know.
I love that. I always say at True Sports that it's not about the therapist, it's about the patient, right? And so
Mhm.
I've changed my tune a little bit on that as I talk to physical therapists and I talk to the True Sports PT team, because I too often was solely focused on the patient and not on making it the absolute best place to work, right? And the best place, not just to rehab, but to be a physical therapist. How do you ingrain a culture of both patient and PT first? It's almost an oxymoron.
Yeah, that was honestly, I left the corporate PT world to start headquarters physical therapy in 2018. And I started with a good buddy of mine, and we're great friends to this day. His name's Curtis Dodson. He's not involved in the business anymore, but we're still great, great friends. And when we took a step back from our corporate jobs, and we said, what is HQ, and how does, what are the things that we really don't like about this corporate setting,
Mhm.
and why are we like wanting to leave, and why are we pissed off, and it was like, okay, if we're going to start HQPT, it has to be something that is not only great for the patients, but is also excellent for the clinicians. If we're going to, you know, ask people to fly the banner of HQPT, and work hard and be in it, we have to provide something that's great. So yeah, that's been front of mind for me since day one. To answer your question, um, the biggest thing there is probably very flexible. I mean, very simple stuff, like not overextending with patients. Like our PTs see maybe 5, 6, 7 at the most patients per day.
Wow.
And that's a pretty big day. I mean, we do all hour-long sessions. The charting and documentation is very simple. Everything, we try and make things as simple as possible and distill it down to the purest form of like, okay, we're not necessarily just going to do it the way it's always been done. Let's kind of rethink it and try and make things better, but a very flexible schedule. Working when you want to work, seeing as many patients as you want to see. Um, we do things like, I think there's a lot of companies that talk a lot about continuing education and mentorship, and you've got all these opportunities and things. And we've honestly, that was a big one that when we started, we were like, you know what? A lot of people talk about this stuff, but we're actually going to do it. And so we meet every week. Every other week, we're going through continuing education. We've partnered with the Level Up Initiative and Clinical Athlete with Quinn Hennick and Zach Gabor, who are just kind of like staples in our community at this point. And
Sure.
so we're one of their first business partners or business affiliates that's going through their program as a company and as a team. But yeah, honestly, it's just simple stuff, where I just think that, and you can feel it and you can see it, when you're around other people that truly care for you, picking each other up, taking care of each other. And it's not like sitting around doing kumbaya sessions and stuff, because I don't know that anybody wants to do that either. But
Right.
um, if anybody on this team has a problem, we're always there for each other, in practical ways. So
That's awesome. How do you keep the lights on at 5 patients a day?
we're an out of network cash based practice.
Mhm.
And so our pricing is honestly very competitive. We have a 4-pack and an 8-pack. as well as a single session rate. We see, we see patients under that model. And there's a couple different tiers for the practitioners, as they're working in the company, that they can work through. Each, has its own unique financial compensation package, all 3 tiers. Another way that we keep the lights on is through corporate wellness. That's honestly a very big part of our business. Is we work with about 10 local companies right now. And in 2024, we're kind of really doubling down on that corporate wellness arm of our practice. So it's about a third of our business right now.
Awesome.
But companies hire us to talk about everything from nutrition to exercise and fitness to heart health to stress management and mental health. And there's an array of, people within my network that we contract in, to help run some of these sessions and things. And then also everybody on staff helps with that. So that's a good way, for us to bump up the margins and things like that. But it's been really great for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the diversification. You're not just selling hours in a clinic. You have found a way to bring in other revenue sources, and I think that's something that all private practitioners can learn from and dig into, especially in this world of insurance reimbursement dwindling, I would say, to put it mildly. So,
We
so I think,
actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead, Ryan. You're the star. This is about you.
I was just gonna say, and selfless plug, but we actually have a corporate wellness mentorship program that we've started. So if there are any other, PTs out there who are like, hey, I'd really like to check out this corporate wellness thing, we actually can kind of help you along and teach you how to do it. So
That's really
yeah.
awesome. Are your PTs salaried to any extent?
No.
Okay.
We have, yep. So they're all W-2 employees, but we have a split model for the first tier, a base salary plus split for the second tier, and then a profit sharing model for the third tier.
And the tiers are solely based on years of service?
Based on production.
Production. Okay. So if you
Mhm.
see a certain amount of patients, you'll escalate to tier 2, tier 3.
Yep, exactly. Now, with that being said, I'll be perfectly honest, there is some flexibility within that because we have some amazing, and I'm telling you, just great PTs, but just great people. I mean, I can't say enough about the team that we have here. Yeah, it's incredible, just the way it's all come together. But there's some flexibility within that too, right? Like we've had one of our practitioners has gone on maternity leave, came back, production. And there was no negative impact on that, right? It's like, yeah, go do your thing, come
Mhm.
back, we're going to take care of you. And so I think that's kind of part of it too, is there's some flexibility within those tiers. There's some standards and guidelines, but each person, even within HQ, is kind of on their own path. So we just try and make it marry up to what their goals are and what they're trying to do, and make sure that quality of life is really high and that you've got plenty of time to do things of value outside
Outside
the
of work.
clinic.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
yeah.
that's awesome, and I think that's what every PT wants, and you want to give them the ability to do that, or alternatively, the ability to work more and earn more, because sometimes
Yep.
that's more important. So I think that's really powerful. You mentioned the maternity leave. We just had our company party, and one of the things I highlighted at our company party was how much I used to dread maternity leave, and
Hmm.
now just how proud and excited I am that an employee is able to give birth, add to their family, all the beautiful things that come with that, and have the security to come back to a burgeoning business and a book of business. And I'm so excited and gratified by that. It's really exciting. I think that has to do with like my shift to saying, hey, we want this to be the best place to work, not just to rehab. So you started in 2018. Talk me through where you got your business education. Hey guys, quick pause and a quick shout out to this new masterclass that we just launched here at True Sports Physical Therapy. Myself and Dr. Tim Stone put together a masterclass of ACL rehab, and we call it From Table to turf. And the reason we call it that is because it's going to teach you exactly how to get your athlete all the way from post-op day one with the nitty-gritty of regaining all of that range of motion, with the tips and the tricks that we use here at True Sports Physical Therapy that gets our athletes better, faster, and stronger. And that's early. And then how do you progress that athlete all the way onto the field with a ball in their foot or a stick in their hands or whatever their sport is, and teach them how to accelerate, how to decel, how to change direction, all the mechanics that go in there. What drills do we use to get our athletes exactly where they need to be back on the field and even better than before injury? And I want you to sign up for that class. Now, you can find it on our website. You can shoot us a direct message and just say, hey, send me the course. It's right now on sale, so make sure you sign up now. It is fully accredited to get you all of your continuing education hours. Sign up for the True Sports Masterclass ACL from table to turf. Thanks, guys.
School of Hard
2018.
Knocks.
Yeah.
Literally. I mean, yeah, we started out, my partner Curtis and I, who we started the business together. We were working in the corporate clinic, and we pretty much spent about a year working full time, and then, 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever, and then 5 to midnight, working on this plan for what we thought HQ could be. And so obviously, there's some background basics of business and, that you pick up along the way. But I'll say, over the last few years, and I will be the first to say, I'm learning more and more every day. I do not have this figured out. And frankly, I'm sure you'll agree with this, is running a business is maybe the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life.
Yep.
Extremely rewarding. I'm a father of 3. Lot of similarity. Like, I don't mean to downplay either, business ownership or being a dad, but there's a lot of similarities there. I mean, it takes so much attention, and it's so hard, but it's also you're just so in it, and it's so rewarding, and you just love it so much. So I would say over the last, maybe 3 years, as I've been transitioning, from just okay, I'm just going to see patients, and however many patients I see, that's how much money I'm taking home, to actually growing a business with a staff and, an attractive place to work and those sorts of things. Some of the biggest resources, if I can give really practical recommendations to the audience, Alex Hormozy has been extremely influential on me. I've read both of his books multiple times, and I think from a quick implementation standpoint of, hey, you are a new business owner, these are the things you should be focusing on. I think it's invaluable. I've read, I've read all the classics, Good to Great, To Sell Is Human, all of the How to Be a Rainmaker, all the classics and things. But I truly think Hormozy's stuff is A1. And so I have to give him a shout out.
I think that's worthwhile. By the way, To Sell Is Human opened my eyes to something that I think PTs suck at by and large, which is having the confidence to sell what it is that we do and that we're so good at. You know who's awesome at that? Chiropractors. And I think PTs could come a long way in understanding that when you are confident in what you're providing, you are selling, and that is the most effective way to sell, as opposed to just harping on closing the deal. I think there's a tremendous amount of gold there. So Hormozy is great. To Sell Is Human is also super worthwhile, and I don't think I thought about that until I read that.
Yeah, I agree.
So okay, so it sounds like you've done a lot of things right. Give me the one thing that, man, I wish I could take a mulligan on that. I really screwed that up when I started this business.
Yeah, I will tell you, for everything I've done right, I've probably done 5 to wrong. I mean, grand scheme of things, it's we're still cruising, we're still going. It's always been forward progress, but it's kind of it's just the people that don't quit, right? That you kind of suck at it, and then you suck at it, and you practice it, and you do it more, and you get better. And to this day, I still see myself very much in that light. So yeah, I mean, I genuinely consider myself very blessed to be in the position where we've been able to survive COVID, where we found different revenue streams in corporate wellness, and we've got a great clinical practice. So all that to say, yes, I've made many
All right,
mistakes.
give me the number one mistake.
Number one would probably be maybe looking outside of myself for external validation. And I know that sounds very ethereal, but I think I've always had like a pretty good vision of what HQ is and what it can be. But I find myself, and especially early on, being like, I need someone else to co-sign on this in terms of like validate my thought. And I think, I don't know that my vision has changed much, but I've become more confident in it through proof of concept.
Mm-hmm.
But there were times when it's like, I need to bring on this other partner because I don't know if I'm the guy for this. I need to bring someone else in, and in reality, it kind of goes back to like how we treat patients. I think I kind of had everything I needed right inside of me already. And I would say if there's any times I've, gotten into situations where I'm like, oh man, that kind of sucked, it was because, I didn't trust myself
Yeah.
and didn't maybe believe in myself as much as I should have. I know it sounds weird because it takes a lot of self-belief to like leave everything behind and start your own business. But those moments of doubt have probably delayed me a bit, where I'm looking for external validation instead of just going.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And it sounds like you came to realize that you do have all the skills that you need. Once you kind of had to use those skills, right? Like you said, proof of concepts, like very um like very small potatoes. I would say, like I remember being so freaked out. How am I gonna get my printer to work with my computer? Because when I worked corporate, it's like you call the computer guy,
Yep.
right? Or whatever.
Yep.
And it's like, thank God I didn't have any freaking patience when I started this business. So I spent 4 hours learning how to hook up my printer so that last week when the receptionist is like, the printer's broken. Like, the printer is not broken. Here's how you get the printer to talk to your computer. Like simple stuff, but it's just
Yep.
trial by fire, and you have to be put in those positions. And it sounds like that's kind of where you found like your self confidence. And you're right; it's not so different to the patient who's like got knee pain and it's going to hurt when I do plyos, and then you show them like, okay, but if you try a plyo like this, it's not going to hurt, and
Mhm.
you just build them up accordingly. So, okay, I digress. Now, um, you mentioned the culture you built and how you're all parking away from the building, and it's patient first. And how do you identify that quality in an applicant? Because that is something that I effed up a million times. Was I was
Yep.
just hiring for the wrong skill, or I was looking, and it wasn't until I figured out, well, here's what I'm actually looking for. Tell me how you look for that patient first approach.
Yeah. So one of the big things I think of in this realm, and this might be redundant, but like the camping trip test. I don't know
Okay.
if you
No,
like.
tell me what that. I live in Baltimore. I don't go camping a bunch. Like
Welcome to
you in
Oregon.
Oregon. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Could I go on a camping trip with this person for a weekend and enjoy the weekend and come back afterward being like, I would do that again?
Yeah.
I know that sounds very subjective, and it is, but yeah, people, I would say to be in a cash based setting, if I'm keeping it totally real with the audience here, you got to be a little entertaining.
Yep.
Like people have to want to come see you. You got to be a little dynamic, right? And so, I can usually tell just sitting down and having a conversation. Like my interview style is very conversational. I just want to get to know you. I want to see how you ask me questions and how we, what the back and forth and what's the dialogue like. And if I find myself and I'm like, gosh, I'm actually like pretty freaking fascinated by this
Cool.
person, that's a huge test for, if I think they're going to be successful in our particular setting. So
Yeah.
we have, there's people from vastly different backgrounds within our setting. And the team we have currently, we sit down and meet and we're like flipping each other crap and we're having fun. And if that You can get a sense on whether or not someone's going to walk in and be like, "Oh my gosh, what did I get myself into?" Or if they're going to be able to dive in head first and enter that culture and add to it.
Yeah, for sure. How do you test their clinical acumen?
So we usually will do some, say, working interview, but like shadowing.
Hmm.
And so we'll have people come through and just spend the day with us. And I'll have them spend some time with Danny, who she's one of our amazing PTs, Danny Deloy, Jack Anderson, and have them just shadow us. We'll ask them questions. Hey, what do you think about this? What would you do? And that, you spend a couple days, maybe even just one, in the clinic and get a pretty good sense of where they're at clinically. We also talk about, I think even something that we may talk about today is like, who do you follow? Who do you listen to?
Yeah.
What's your tribe? And
Mhm.
you can typically get a pretty good sense about where someone's at for their tribe. But I'll also say, you know, clinical skills can be learned to a certain degree. It's real tough to change, a personality or, just people that have been through things and have life experience and have grit and can overcome challenges. That's something that's harder to teach,
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I started looking for, maybe this will resonate with you, is I love seeing athletic trainers on or an ATC on their resume. I don't care
Yep.
as much about CSCS. I don't care about USAW. It's nice, but when I see ATC, here's what I definitely know: they're hard workers,
Yep.
because ATs, man, they just grind and they are
Yep.
there forever, and they are. I'll never understand this, but they are squirting water in athletes' mouths for no
Hmm.
reason, as well as doing the rehab. And so, like, it comes with far less ego. So I appreciate kind of seeing that. Give me feedback on my interview process, because what I do is I made up a case of an athlete that we see a million times. We have a shoulder case, an ACL case, an ankle case where they have failed rehab elsewhere and they're coming to True Sports because we see that like crazy. And I give
Yep.
that to them 2-3 days in advance. And then they come in and I'm the patient and they're the PT. And I like to see kind of how do they think on their feet? What do they do when the quad doesn't turn on? What do they do when the knee doesn't straighten or the shoulder's painful at end range flexion? So I get a sense for their clinical acumen, but also how adaptable are they? And that all happens in our very busy environment, which sounds like yours, which is a performance facility, right? It's
Hmm.
not a PT clinic, it's a performance facility. And then I'm able to see, like, how do they get in? My first mistake in that case was I used to spring that on them when they walked in, and they would
Yeah.
freak the F out, and that ruins everything. I just,
Hmm.
I want it to be comfortable, but I want to test them like that. What do I need to change about that? Or what would you add on that?
Great question. I don't necessarily. I think we're after the same thing, really. Kind of in our processes is
Mhm.
like, how do you think on your feet? Can I, as we're going through, I have a patient doing a drill, and I'm like, hey, what would you do differently, or like, how would you dose this out?
Yep.
What would be your loading parameters for this? And it's one of those things where when you're going through that with someone, you might actually, you as the boss man,
Yep.
might be surprised by their approach, and you might be like, actually, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I don't even know if I would have thought of that. Like, that's awesome. So I do like it from that regard. You might, if it might be a little bit different dynamic when you're evaluating your potential employer versus where there's that perceived like power differential,
Sure. Yep.
real or
Yep.
imagined or whatever. But so it might be a little bit different than treating a patient where they're genuinely in a bad
Hurt.
place. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it might be a little skewed, but I think it's really good. I think we're both after the same thing, which is, can you think on your feet? How comfortable are you talking through this stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Okay, good. Thank you for that feedback. You've done an awesome job of not just running a clinic and treating high level athletes, but treating pros and treating them in their house or doing house visits or treating them on the road. How did you break into that world? True Sports Physical Therapy is growing like wildfire. We have 14 locations, soon to be more. We are throughout the state of Maryland. We're in Pennsylvania, in Lebanon and York, Pennsylvania, as well as in Delaware, in Newark and Wilmington, Delaware. Like I said, so many more practices to come, and we always need outstanding sports physical therapists. Our treatment style is unique. We are one-on-one with your athlete for 45 minutes every single session. You do the entire treatment, you do the entire evaluation, and they are in state-of-the-art facilities where you have room to run, throw, and jump, and really get your athlete all the way back to on the field and better and stronger than they were. We also have outstanding salaries, comp structures, bonus abilities, 401ks, as well as a very strong continuing education offering, including in-house continuing education. And we're looking for you. Now is the time, as we are growing like crazy. Just shoot your resume over to Yoni, Y-O-N-I, at True Sports PT, or shoot us a DM and we will hit you back. We will get you in for our unique, tried and true interview process and really make a determination that this is the right place for you to grow your career and get your athletes better than ever. We can't wait to hear from you.
So it's funny you brought up athletic training because that's my background. I come from, kind of the tail end of the athletic training bachelor's degree, right? Because most is all master's. So you don't get necessarily, unless people have been to school for a real long time, you don't necessarily get the PT AT combo as much as when I was coming out. So, one thing, just to almost circle back to what you said about the athletic trainers, not to go too far back here, but communication is huge. When I see an ATC on the resume, also same thing is like, they're going to know how to be in a whirlwind environment where, lots of different people from different backgrounds, they'll be able to handle it, communicate, all those things. And so that was basically my background was athletic training at Oregon State. I worked football and baseball there. Fast forward to HQPT. I also should probably mention I did, like a clinical rotation at Exos 2 months, and worked with some, did NFL combine prep with them. I had kind of maintained, I seeking out mentorship in that high level athletics realm.
Okay.
So fast forward to HQPT. There's an NFL guy, and I can say his name, Brandon Cooks, who played for the New Orleans Saints at the time. This was early in his career. He was an Oregon State guy, and he was looking for a place here in Portland, Oregon to train. And the reason is because, his wife's from here, so they want to live here in the off season. So he goes around and interviews a bunch of places, ends up landing in my office with Coach Eric Jernstrom, who I also need to shout out. He's the strength coach and maybe the smartest person I've ever met.
Cool.
Coach Eric is incredible. And basically Brandon sat down and just started interviewing us like, hey, I want to be here, but if I can't find somewhere to train, I gotta live somewhere else. And basically from then on, the three of us, we put our heads together, and that's kind of where the magic came from. And then along the way, more and more, let's say NFL elite level athletes have, word of mouth, heard what we're doing, made their way in, and the program has grown. With that being said, the home visits and traveling out kind of came from like, hey, we put in all this work in the off season and we've had all of this right at our fingertips. And then it's kind of weird, the athlete leaves and you're like, what, I'm not going to see you for like 4 or 5 months. Right. And so ultimately it was Brandon Cooks asking me, hey, would you be willing to, in the in season, fly out, do some work with me, keep me in it, keep me going. And then that's evolved into doing that with a few other athletes as well.
Okay. So I've lived in that world a little bit of doing home visits, and for NFL guys, tell me what a home visit with Ryan Baugus looks like, because I think the sports PT coming out of school, they have no idea what to do when they walk into a player's hotel room or house, as it were, right? So how do you approach that?
Yeah, so I have a few experiences where it's someone I've never worked with before.
Mhm,
A couple years ago, not this season, but the season before, mutual connection got a call. Hey, can you go out to Pittsburgh and work with a few of their O-line guys?
mhm,
Sure. Never met those guys before in my life. So I think I will say that having years of clinical experience in, especially within a very specific area such as football, field sports, you can probably get to the heart of what this person is trying to accomplish quick-ish,
mhm.
because you don't have a lot of time, right? Like you said, you're showing up in a hotel room, you're showing up. I do a lot of work in the players' houses, and I work with incredible guys that bring me into their homes, and I usually will just stay at their homes. They have big houses, you
Yeah,
know what I mean? Because kind of comes with the territory.
yeah,
And so yeah, if it's someone I've never met before and I'm coming in cold, um, it's like, hey, nice to meet you. Um, Try and get a little bit of their background, injury history. What are their goals? What are they dealing with right now? What is their current training? Even like their specific team practice schedule. What do you guys do Monday, Tuesday? Are you doing, install Friday or Saturday, or what does that look like? Getting ready for Sunday. And so then we can kind of hit the ground running with whatever treatment we decide to do. And I'm not messing up their schedule, or if they're going to have a real big day on Thursday, I'm not smoking them on Wednesday, when they've already practiced Wednesday. Right.
yep.
So yeah, it's drilling down into what does your schedule look like? What are the demands that you're going to be placed under? And then how do I kind of like fit a puzzle piece into that?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to highlight is when I'll do a home visit, especially when I'm, let's say, call it an initial eval in home, it is so much subjective. I mean, it
Mhm.
is 90% conversation. Number one, that's going to produce buy-in, like, hey, I trust this guy in my house or with
Yep.
my career. And number two, there's so many moving parts, right? When dealing with a pro athlete, so wrapping your arms around exactly what they're doing, when they're doing, how they're doing it. And by the way, diving deep into, well, I have a lift on Tuesday. Okay, what's the lift? What's the coach's perspective? What's his goals of that session? They may not have one. And I think a lot of our listeners would be surprised at some of the trash strength and conditioning that is available even at the very elite levels. Sometimes they're awesome, but sometimes they're not. And so just getting an understanding of what they're doing, what the athlete's training age is, and where you fit in. How do you handle therapeutic exercise when you're in their house if they don't have a gym, let's say?
hmm Yeah, and there's, just to capitalize on your last point too, there's so much nuance even between, call it, different levels of players, right? There's certain players on a team that may have a lot more leeway,
Yep.
based on their
Who they are.
performance,
Yep.
the type of money they're making, who they are. Um, and so you can come in and be like, hey, it might be worthwhile trying to do this. And they're like, yeah, I'll go tell my strength coach, no problem, done. Other people who are a little more on the bubble, they might not have that pull to be able to go in and say, hey, I'm working with this guy from Oregon. We want to make these tweaks and changes. And even each individual organization, football organization that I've worked with, there's varying degrees of acceptance to outside people. So, there's some that I've worked with that are like, "Oh yeah, man, sounds great. Like let's team up on this. Let's work together." And others are like, "It's probably best that they don't know that I'm here," type thing. You know what I
Right.
mean?
For sure. Yeah. For
So
sure.
yeah, there's a lot of nuance there.
I think there's a lot of nuance. I think it's also, don't forget that just the way you put your patient first, the way you build buy-in with your patients, sometimes always those skills transfer to when you're talking to other clinicians or other
Mhm.
strength or performance professionals, where too often I have been big boyed by the guy who's in house because he wants to show me what's what. That
Mhm.
I try to keep it front of mind that I never want to do that to
Yep.
another provider, another clinician, because the person who suffers is the athlete, right? And
Yep.
so, just it's the same way you sell and create buy-in with your client. It's the same thing with those other professionals. I think that goes a long way. What's the biggest surprise in working with an NFL athlete?
The biggest surprise in working with an NFL athlete is probably the It's playing in the NFL is kind of like a drug.
Okay. Keep going. Say
You've
more.
got 90,000 people, screaming for you. You're running out onto a field. I mean, the autonomic nervous system response is through the roof, the sympathetic stress. And, it's funny. Most of the guys that I've worked with, if they play a primetime Sunday night game, they're not getting to sleep until 3, 4 a.m.
That's
And
wild.
these are guys that are not out partying. Like they're dialed in, they're at home, but it's like they can't get to sleep. And surprising thing, is just that, you think about, we hold these people in a very high echelon of like high performance with nutrition and training and all these things. And, there's some real challenges with football specifically, right? From just the adrenaline dump and the sympathetic release and response that you get. And then you're trying to, regulate the autonomic nervous system just as much as you're trying to, make a hamstring, feel really good and strong. And so there's that. And then there's probably also just how susceptible that population is to BS within our field, to be blunt, because you're talking about a population of people that have status and clout, time, money, resources. And so, yeah, you have the money to spend on basically anything. And so from a treatment modality
Yep.
standpoint, and then you have some probably predatory marketing as well, that's kind of geared toward like, well, hey, if you're not doing this, then, you're leaving something on the table. And so I think a lot of times those athletes will gravitate toward or be influenced, to gravitate towards something that might be more in the category of like very superfluous BS. It's like, no, let's do the basics really, really well.
Yeah.
And, that thing is just kind of like a waste of time and money.
Yeah.
And so they're pretty susceptible to that.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I just had a conversation with one of our awesome PTs, Brian Hunter, who was a pitcher for the Reds, and now he's a PT. He did a rotation at Reinhold's place in Boston, and we were talking about what makes Reinhold great at overhead athlete. He's like, dude, he does sideline external rotation for like a million reps. He does prone 90-90 where it's like, what makes him special is that he just does the basics really freaking well. And like, there's a reason that stuff has been around for so long, because it freaking works. And you got to have the confidence to stick to your principles of it doesn't have to be fancy. John Wooden said, don't be fancy, just be good.
That's right.
And I think that bodes well. I've also been very surprised at some of the intellectual capacity of these athletes. I think the time of the dumb jock, I don't think those guys make it. I've been really impressed with some of the conversations that I've just had and what I've learned from these athletes. I think that was a surprise to me. And then isn't it amazing? Like every once in a while, even though you've been working with NFL athletes, sometimes I just cannot believe what they can do physically. I can't, like, I could show them the hardest exercise in the world and they pick it up so goddamn fast. Or the basics, like following. I just had a running back and we were just going over like walking knee hugs, like immediately following a massive knee surgery. And he just picked it up so fast. It would have taken me 3 weeks to teach a normal athlete how to do it. It's just fascinating. So you better come ready to challenge them appropriately or nitpick the F out of everything they're doing because they're just so good at moving. It's wild.
Yeah. I got one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. One of the linemen we work with, 325 pounds, 15-pound weight vest, offensive lineman, 20 dead hang pull-ups.
It's crazy.
I'm like, bro, what?
It's nuts.
How is this real? It's unbelievable.
And they're not sweating. I just love that. That's something that just like still gets me excited to treat some of these guys.
It's fun to push the limits, right?
Yeah.
To see like, because you truly are. With some of these, we've got athletes that are running close to 24 miles an hour, 23.75.
Crazy.
Brandon Cooks ran last year on a flying 20. And you're like, we're really pushing the limits here of what's possible. It's fun. It's really fun.
It's pretty wild. And it amazes me. I was just talking about like a random. Now he's a coach in the league. He was a special teams star for the Ravens for like a decade. He was the punt protector, and he ran 23. He's the fastest guy on the team with a dad bod. Like not like
Unbelievable.
it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do a ton of your work on field, and teaching more of the performance side. It's like where performance blends into rehab or vice versa. Can you just walk me through your approach when you're taking an athlete to their return to sport phase? How do you teach them to be ready to go back to compete?
Yeah, I kind of look at buckets of need, because the buckets of need are kind of all along this spectrum of like high end return to sport versus like, you're severely impaired, versus your baseline. And so we kind of look at everything from movement potential, movement expression, movement capacity, psychosocial, lifestyle factors, um, tissue health, and like literal, natural history with tissues. We kind of find whatever entry point, for these buckets that we're at. So if we are literally, end stage, return to sport, I don't know that my mindset changes that much. We're just adjusting the dosage to meet and probably exceed the demands a little bit, to build somewhat of a capacity buffer for, what they're going to be doing when they return to their sport. So very practically, we get data, like if we're talking about it very high level, if you're talking about, you have GPS data, you have force plate data, you have all this stuff. Like the GPS data for us is huge. If we can get that for a player from their strength staff, and understanding, what type of yardage they're going to be expected to run in OTAs, what type of yardage they're going to be expected to run in camp. Honestly, preparing for camp is probably harder than, in terms of the amount of capacity you have to build, is probably harder than for the in season. But if we have some really solid numbers there, then you just reverse engineer the program, and you're like, so once again, it's not rocket science, right? But you build, based on, the needs of what that person's going to need to do on the field, and create a well periodized, well dosed program that builds that up.
Yeah. Okay. So more specifically, clinically speaking,
Mhm.
athletes coming back from an ACL and they're ready to run 3 months, 4 months. You're ready. Their QI is where it needs to be. Their force plate data is where it needs to be. What is your first approach to giving them some of that input to prepare to run?
Yeah. So typically we'll start with, anything from march skip progressions, pogas. Like you said, if we've tested them, we've done force, output testing, all of that. A pretty standard return for me would be march, skip, a skip, bound, maybe some pogos along with that, wall drills, just trying to restore some mechanics. Prior to that, we've probably done sled pushes and things like that. And then, when we actually get back into running, I typically think about you obviously have the tissue demand and like the acute to chronic workload in your brain, right? But I find that if I'm dosing, gearing toward the cardiovascular system, that stuff will probably take care of itself. So we're probably doing low level cardiac output, trying to build that baseline aerobic fitness. And the dosing for that actually lines up pretty well with,
Yeah.
returning to run, because it's genuinely supposed to be easy work, right?
Yep.
And then, so I'm not like a huge, I don't have to have like an Alter G, or like I don't, they're nice, but I don't need that per se. And then building that up over time to higher force demands, faster sprinting,
And
etc.
and where do you put box jumps in this progression?
Oh yeah. We'll typically, I would probably, depending on the athlete, it's funny. I've got two ACLs right now that I'm working with. One's a skateboarder, one's a college football player.
Okay.
And it's funny because one of them has spent their whole life in a weight room,
Yep.
and the other one has spent their whole life on a skateboard.
Yep.
And so, the yeah, I'll typically, with a plyo progression, I'll probably be doing some sort of plyo prep before we get into running, which could be anything, where let's say we're not heavily biasing a stretch shortening cycle. We're kind of taking out amortization and we're saying, we're just going to drop to a base and we're just going to stand, we're going to drop to a base. And then, it's anything from stepping into not even off anything, but like, so forward step into a single leg stance. I'm also, to be honest, a really big fan of kind of like a weight shift and stick, where you start on one leg and kind of step forward, not a bound. Picture like a bound without bounding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Forward single leg stick, forward single leg stick. And if that's good and they're tolerating things well, then we'll go to, non-counter movement, counter movement jumps, double contact. We'll start to mix in. I will go, box before hurdle. And then we'll start to mix in more reactive, more lateral. Yeah.
Love that. Love that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the mistakes I see so often is going back to run before you're doing box jumps. And like, I'll have applicants when they come in and I give them their ACL case and I'm like, okay, when would this athlete run? Well, about 4 months. When would you do box jumps? Well, about 5 months. I'm like, that doesn't make any freaking sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's think that through. So, okay, that's good to hear and seemingly a nice progression. All right, let's wrap up with our Eric Cressay lightning round. You ready?
Ready.
Okay, what have you changed your mind on in the last 5 years, Ryan?
I have changed my mind on our ability to create tissue change by putting our hands on people.
Love it. Okay, and what made you change that?
Reading literature.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's like when I found out that it's impossible to sense the articulation of the SI joint. I'm like, what the hell have I been doing for the
Because
last?
we grew up, in PT. Yeah, I'm with you.
They're still freaking doing that. Okay, where is Ryan Baugus and PTHQ in 5 years?
Still doing what we're doing in terms of treating every single person that walks in like the star of the show.
Yeah.
And I don't have big goals of, I want to have 15, clinics and franchise. I think if we're doing a really good job, we are bringing in people that fit our culture. And as we bring in great people that fit our culture, and as the demand of, for our services increases, we may, be expanding into bigger facility, maybe adding a couple more, but maintaining the quality of what we're doing and the heart of what we're doing is we will still be doing that in 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. What is the biggest threat to PTHQ right now?
There's so much social media.
Yep.
I mean, and there's just a lot of misinformation out there. And, I think if people, were to mistake, passion for expertise, that to me is kind of like the biggest thing threat wise, is like you can have a really loud microphone and you can be super passionate, but you haven't been through the fire. And so I think, that's just a big pic. And I'm not thinking about anybody in particular. I'm just thinking big picture is like, there's just so much noise out there and it's
Yeah.
hard to get, because a lot of times the great information isn't super sexy. It's hard to get that to shine through, some of the noise. So that's misinformation, bad information, loud microphones. That's probably one of the biggest.
Yeah, because they'll let anyone start their own podcast these days.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Myself not included. Okay. Aside from Zach and Quinn, who is the most influential PT in your career?
Can I say athletic trainer first?
Hell yes.
My mom. My mom was an athletic trainer at Arizona State. She's the one who got me 100% into this profession because she realized at an early age that I was not going to be a pro athlete, which I wanted to be.
Yeah.
She's like, you know what, Ryan, if you want to still hang out with, be in athletics, athletic training might be pretty good for you. So, yeah, my mom, athletic training, PT wise, Probably one of my professors in physical therapy school, there's two of them. Dr. Dan Kang at George Fox University is an incredible person with just the best heart. And a lot of, I think, my mindset about how I approach patients stems from him. And then Andrew Mazzaros, neuro professor at George Fox, taught me to question everything and never take anything at face value and just totally screw the status quo. So yeah.
Love it. Okay. Shout out to them. Good. Those are awesome life lessons. You have taught me and our audience a ton about culture and how to run a clinic and how to run a business. And I appreciate that. This was such a eye-opening conversation. So Ryan, thank you for your time. Thank you for all you're doing with HQPT. It just sounds like, to steal our own tagline, what sports rehab should be. It just sounds like a great place. So good on you, man. Thank you.
I appreciate that immensely. And it's funny I don't talk about this stuff all the time. Right. So when I get questions like this and you start talking about the journey and the people and, for me, I'm very humbled that you would reach out and ask me to talk because, I feel like I am still learning all the time. And we all are, right?
We all
Like,
are.
yeah. So I genuinely appreciate the opportunity and I'm humbled and honored. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, okay. Before you go, tell us where we can find you on social. Tell us how people can find PTHQ because it seems like the best place to work and anything else you want to share.
I appreciate that so much. So at HQ_PT on
N-
Instagram.
Not to be confused with PTHQ. It's obviously HQPT. Go ahead.
Right. HQ_PT. On Instagram, our website is headquarterspt.com. And honestly, my email's on there. I'm not hard to get a hold of. So if there's any, students, people out there that are, have questions, I'm a pretty accessible guy. So always feel free to reach out.
Awesome. A great guy to learn from. Thank you for your time. Thank you to all of the True Sports family for listening. We appreciate you dearly. Enjoy, guys.
Thank you.